All right, welcome everyone to the workshop on promotion and tenure for community-based research, but also if you're not going up for promotion or tenure, and also if you don't do community-based research, welcome everyone. We're gonna start with a round of introductions. It's myself and a few other people who are helping out and supporting this. My name is Max Liboiron. My pronouns are they, them. I am a full professor at Memorial University, and I do community-based environmental monitoring, mostly with the United Civic Government. And I have gone through my entire promotion and tenure with 0 publications on my main community-based research piece because the data has been embargoed by community until very, very recently, which means I got some tricks if you don't publish out of your community work. Arn, would you go next?
Thank you, Max. My name's Arn Keeling. He, him are my pronouns. I'm also a full professor in the Department of Geography at Memorial University. My community engaged work examines historical and contemporary engagements and encounters of Indigenous communities, mostly in Northern Canada, with mineral extraction. Yeah, I've also served as a department head. Relevant to this group, I've served as a department head and therefore around a kind of faculty-wide heads table that examines P&T files from different disciplines, as well as serving on my own department's P&T and advising and mentoring faculty members as head in that process as well. So thanks much. I will pass it along.
Rosie, would you mind going next?
Sure. Aloha kakahiaka kako. Good morning. My name is Rosie ʻAnolani Alegado. I'm a full professor of Oceanography and Hawaii Sea Grant at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I direct the Microbial Ecology and Evolution in Hawaii Lab, and I'm also the director of Hawaii Sea Grant's Ulanaʻike Center of Excellence. And my work applies contemporary and OEV methodologies within a One Health framework to understand the eco-evolutionary processes influencing microbiomes of Indigenous seascapes. The community-based work that I've primarily done involves Pacific Islander communities in Hawaii as well as American Samoa. And I have also been, similar to Max, I have been a little bit lower in publishing work from the community because of questions around Indigenous data sovereignty.
And Rosie is also recently a full professor, so has gone through this dance twice. All right, Letitia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Letitia Henville. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a settler and uninvited guest on traditional Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe territory, and it's a privilege for me to live and work on this land. I am not an academic. I am an editor. I edit maybe a half dozen promotion and tenure applications every year. So I come from a very writing focused perspective. How do you talk about what you've done during promotion and tenure? I write a column for University Affairs. I've just put one of the recent ones in the chat from April, which includes references to Max's promotion and tenure dossier.
So you heard it right. You can get a third party to edit your P&T file, and people do it professionally and are good at it. All right, so what is going to happen next? Where's my paper that says what's going to happen next? Yes, for the next little bit, I am going to sort of do a little bit of a spiel on ways to approach specifically your CV. Today is CV, tomorrow's workshop is the rest of the dossier, which of course can't be covered in a workshop. At any point, if Letitia or Rosie or Arn, if you want to jump in, please do so. You can raise your hand if you want. You can just do it if you want. You can put it in the chat if you want, and there's an 85% chance I'll see it. So feel free to do that. And after that, oh, look, here's what we're going to do. Introduce the team. We've already done that, so we're winning the agenda. Master timeline. I'm going to do a little spiel. It's 20 minutes. Longer if someone jumps in. 25 minutes, 30 minutes. Overview. What does that mean? Oh, the spiel. Then we're going to go into breakout groups. I'll do some ground rules for how the breakout groups work, especially because people are talking about their professional advancement. There are actually some ethics involved in what you do and do not share. And then we'll end with resources. The breakout groups will take up most of the time of what we're doing. And the team members will circulate between the breakout groups to help people, but you're actually going to be working on your CVs and brainstorming how to make awesome CVs together that are appropriate to community-based work. So, overview. Oop, wrong direction. So, one of the things that I think is really important to understand about a CV and a P&T file is that it's not the same CV maybe that you use for other things. Your CV for your promotion and tenure file will probably have to be transformed so that it maps onto and matches the categories of your merit review. It is the raw data for what you put in your dossier, so they better match super well. And so the first step is always, no matter what you're doing, whether you're in promotion and tenure, promotion or tenure, whatever, is you start always with your promotion tenure criteria, because that's what you're writing to. This is a job evaluation. This is not your life's work. It is, so there's a specific genre, and this is what governs your genre. So you're going to start with that. And then you use your CV and the dossier to curate. It's not a data dump. It's curated and to exemplify the stuff in here, which means that even if you do the best work in the world, if you don't map them onto this, you don't have a good P&T file. So that's what we're going to try and walk you through a little bit. I'm going to show you some examples of how you bridge this if you do community-based work that isn't always obviously in promotion and tenure criteria. It can be, not easily. I don't think anyone's work can easily map on. No one's work easily maps onto promotion and tenure criteria. That's the good news. Community-based folks aren't at a fundamentally different place than people who do really interdisciplinary work or very collaborative work or something like that. They're all translation work. So I'm going to go through some examples of how you can do that translation work in a CV so you have better raw data and better sort of evidence in your CV for this kind of stuff. So unless you are in a type of university where explicitly publications are not the most important thing, publications are the most important thing. And there are, University of Puget Sound, it's a teaching university, not the most important thing, for instance. But most of the time, peer-reviewed publications are the coin of the realm. So there's different things you can do to start marking up your publications, to start moving towards some of the relational and value-based stuff that you might be doing. Super common to have a little summary at the top. And that little summary at the top can look at like all sorts of things. It can just provide like a snapshot. Here's the number, super helpful. So I don't have to go 1, 2, 3, 4 when I'm reading your CV as a committee member. You can put them into sections where you've got, this bottom one is Eve Tux. This is used, this is public. She's got juried and invited, so she can make different arguments, like 36 juried. That means they're peer reviewed in a certain way, you know, that sort of stuff. We've got someone here, this is Ann Brooks, where the star doesn't indicate student, it indicates a co-author, a community co-author, right, in the second order place in those. Other things you can do, this one's from mine. I have a very data-rich CV, so I've got all same sort of things, but at the top, so it fits nicer in a CV format. And I put the percentage because it's easier to understand, and I'm making the case, actually, my biggest percentage, I promise, is still peer-reviewed. I promise. But also, I am like, where is my white papers and reports, which are mostly for community, is one of my very significant outputs by chunk. As other people, I've got students, but I've underlined them, which is more common in the sciences. I've got how author order was determined, because that's a protocol that I publish on. I've got open access noted, and I've got publication awards access. So what you end up with are these extremely like information rich entries without taking up more space, which is important if you have a page limit. It also, like, I've got my book is fancy, and so like the size of the fanciness is reflected in how much is annotated. So there's different moves you can make like that. In terms of other, I didn't have the example here. Other things you can do, this is an alt metric. If you aren't familiar with alt metrics, and you do public facing work of any kind that has input in any kind of public, you should definitely check it out as a metric to put in your file. This is a massively high alt metric. Mine are like 56, and that's fancy. So like this is a fancy, like, don't use this as a bar for yourself. But having whether something's open access, whether it's preprint, which means it's that's how it's available. Top 1% of articles, that comes from the alt metrics. The number of views. I've seen a lot of community-based work where creating the data set or creating the archive is the most important part of the work. So this one, the supplemental data has way more use than the actual article. That's something you can highlight. So you can provide this as annotations in your actual CV list. Anything for the team to add for publications?
I've just added in the chat that I take live notes, similar to how people used to live tweet, because that helps me to focus. So if it helps you to focus by also taking notes, feel free to join me in my Google Doc.
Awesome, thank you. That will be also very helpful for revising things. And then Rosie's put the altmetrics link in. You all got homework, you all got like worksheets. Altmetrics has a huge chunk in the looking at how to measure impact and stuff like that. I have, just as a spoiler, when I've been an outside reviewer for people who have not very many publications, I've made the case for promotion or tenure based on those sorts of scores, saying like, yeah, there weren't a lot of them, but they were massively impactful in these multiple sort of audiences. So that's important if you don't have a lot of peer-reviewed pubs, or can be. Funding. There's nowhere I can move where I'm not in the way of this one. So external funding will always be more important than internal funding, always, because it's more competitive and therefore has a wider sort of way to talk about merit. So always be clear about whether you have which is your internal grants and which are your external grants. Also be really clear about your role. I've done a lot of external reviews where I can't tell the person's role, which means they're implying they're the PI or principal applicant. And if they're not, that raises doubt. And you never want to raise doubt. So just be clear. You can see this person, whose name is Nick Lynch and gave me to share this with permission, had the best organized P&T file I have ever seen in my life. And that organization went towards his promotion and tenure because like the letter wrote itself. Super helpful bolding, super helpful headings, super helpful like identification of his role versus other ones. This one is particularly nice because Dr. Lynch had a sub award within a larger award. So he named the amount of the larger award and then how much he had. I now trust him so much. I now can talk about him in part of teams. He has all of his team members and their disciplines listed, which means I can talk about his interdisciplinary team experience as merit. There's an end date to his years, not just a start date. So I can talk about the difference between a 3-year grant and a 7-year grant and a 1-year grant. And I can talk about how much money per year, right? These are things that your CV should say. And if they don't, there's not as much information to talk about how awesome you are or the type of awesome you are specifically. All right, now something specifically about public and community sections and team folks who might have more about like what people can actually add in terms of sections to their CVs. So this one is from Chelsea Rochman, who does a lot of policy work, and she works in the same field as I do, which is plastic pollution research. And this is in her service section. I would not put it in her service section. I would have put it in her research section. And the rule of thumb I use is something I learned from Norm Cato, who is our old department chair, mine and Arn's, where he said, almost all the time, people who do community and public and value-based research, justice-oriented research, accidentally put research in service because for all sorts of internalized reasons. But basically, if Arn could do it or you could do it, it's service. If only you could do it, it's research because it's based on your expertise. So if you're sitting on a committee, but you are called in specifically because of your expertise in community-based something or other, then that's actually research, not service. Or it's like expertise-based service, and you can figure out how to map them between. In Dr. Rutschman's case, she does a lot of policy work and is called in a lot as an expert into government and other spaces and NGO spaces to talk about that. So she had a section in her, I think it was something like university service or department service, university service, blah, blah, blah. And then she had policy experience under service. And you can see she's given herself different types of roles that as you get later and later, she can argue get more and more leadership-y. So yeah.
Just to jump in there, Max, it's on speaking. I hard agree that this should go under research, and I think I ended up creating a heading that was something like, expert reviews, consulting, and something like that. To even specify that a little bit more. And it's incredible what you actually can end up putting in that basket that does reflect your unique, as you put it, expertise on a particular topic. And it could be, committees that you've been invited to sit on, whether public facing or things that actually would be, they might be community engaged, but they're kind of opaque and they're difficult to cite. But, that's actually part of my unique expertise so I sit on a collaborative mine closure subcommittee that's run between Inuit governments and a mining company that nobody really would know exists outside of that. But I could put it in that basket because I was specifically invited to join that group and bring my expertise to support that group.
Yeah, and in your dossier, that's research, not service.
Yeah, 100%.
Perfect. All right. Here's some other examples of doing that sort of stuff. So this is the presentation section of a CV. So this is mine. So expert role, same thing, expert invitee, sort of like what Arn was talking about. And these are government or international House of Commons appearances. So in addition, so I've put it above my keynote. So I have this implicit argument in my CV that talks about the most to least important type of presentations I have based on university review, and I put expert before keynotes. I also have this section on public presentations, which used to be a lot of like standing in front of public, but now are almost exclusively community meetings, and they take up a very large chunk of what I do. And then now I'm a workshop queen or king or hog or something. And so I can make the case that now I do a lot of that, doing this sort of thing. Yes, Letitia.
I just wanted to add that I have, in these kinds of tables, it could be worthwhile to distinguish between career totals and total since last review or total since appointment at this institution. So those would be different rows. So you would have the heading row, a row that has a label of career total, and a row that has a label of total since last review or total since appointment.
Yeah, and that's especially important if like your review clock starts after you get your PhD, which is after you've got your assistant professorship, or if you're going up from associate to full or something like that. Absolutely. Other things you can put in are, oops, sorry, I'm gonna unhighlight you so you're not, don't have to watch your face. Things like if you've created tools or protocols, open licensed things, that sort of stuff. You can have a section for them. In this case, everyone who used them or has used them in a peer review publication are listed as like, see how useful this is? And then I also mapped it because almost all these folks are from the Global South, people who use the tools I've created. I talk about the licenses. I talk about how it's been cited. Here's another, oops, just kidding. Here's another one. Yeah. Tools and websites that these are some of his main research outputs. He could have put views and like the number of unique views, which he'd be able to get from the back of his website. Here's another example of community service, which is sort of a cross between what Arn was talking about for committees and that sort of stuff. I have seen someone put the number of hours they spend in community service, where they took like an average for a month and then multiplied it by 12 for a year. And if you think about your research as 3 pillars, teaching, research, and service, and you work a 40-hour work week, which is a fake average, then I could make the case in this person's file that their time in community, which was required for research, like tripled the size of that pillar compared to the others in terms of time they were taking in there. And it was, that sort of stuff. It's part of their methodology. There's different ways to show that up. Any other thoughts from the team about things you can highlight in your CV that are not normally highlighted, that are like really exemplary of community-based or public-facing impactful work?
Jumping in to say, I think it's useful to distinguish between things like public-facing, knowledge mobilization, knowledge dissemination, and then things that are more bi-directional, community engagement, knowledge exchange. If you're not sure if your reviewers will understand these terms, if you're at a very traditional institution where they may not understand the difference between knowledge mobilization and knowledge exchange, you could define these terms by citing an authoritative source, like a national or international scholarly association, or some sort of meta review, published peer-reviewed synthesis.
Yeah, you've also, in the chat, you put for when your work is covered by the media, to differentiate between it's a feature about your work versus an interview versus like one soundbite potentially in a nugget. I differentiate between those things, as well as regional, national, and international sources, that sort of stuff. So more headings are not bad, because they can sort of help characterize your work. They can help characterize your work with a very little word count. Headings, beautiful thing. Anything else, Arner, Rosie?
I would just say, I mean, obviously we're talking about the dossiers specifically tomorrow. So presumably one of the decisions folks will have to make is how much of this clarification work and contextualization work is happening in the dossier, for which these lines on the CV are providing evidence, versus, oh, you need to do that in the CV itself. So I'll leave that question open, because I think the dossiers are so powerful at helping you tell your story. But as you alluded to earlier, the kind of having the appropriate headings and characterizations that are just meaty enough on the CV without being like long and discursive or whatever, can make sure that they speak to each other and work together.
Yeah, so here's a teaser from tomorrow. So this is an advanced slide. This is the criteria of screenshot criteria for promotion and tenure at my university. And there's a list of all the things, factors that may be considered but include but not limited to the publication of books, monographs, and contributions to edited books, papers by both refereed and non-refereed journals, scholarly presentations delivered at professional and community meetings, success in grant competitions. Each of these is a heading in your CV now, because the criteria said so. So yes, you do have to, yeah. And that's like too many headings for a normal CV, but just the right amount for promotion and tenure at this institution. Yeah. Some people include their H-index or field-weighted index in their CVs. If it's good, community-based work is not usually well reflected in something like an H-index. If you do provide something like a field-weighted index or an alt metric or something, make sure you have a key for how it's defined and made. Don't if you provide an unusual metric, make sure you have an explanation for that unusual metric. Sure.
Jumping in on unusual metrics. I have a citation for this and I'll pull it up somewhere. I don't usually recommend including things that are not well understood, including field-weighted citation impact or impact of citation. I can't remember what FWIC stands for. I love FWIC. I think it should be better recognized. if you wanted to include it in your narrative, maybe you could then also reference it in your CV. But in general, I tend to go conservative on promotion and tenure applications because I'm cynical. And I worry about over-reliance on things that won't be well understood or well recognized by external reviewers.
Rosie, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so just to follow up on some things I'm seeing in the chat around organizing around your CV to recognize work with community organizations. So I do have a section called NGO and Community Research Partnerships, which is in the research section before teaching and before service, where I do lay out. And then if you do work in areas that are thematic, you know, as Max said, you can have whatever headings you want. So for me, I do a lot of work with Indigenous aquaculture, like a couple different groups within that theme. And so I kind of like set myself up in my CV so that later in the dossier, I can just easily point out people to like thematically where I have made more impact in this area. So you can also like sub-organize some of your, it doesn't just have to be like all of the different communities, you can organize it thematically. So that's what I suggest doing. And you can like kind of list different roles you've had as an advisory committee member or a participant or a coordinator or, you know, whatever is appropriate.
Thank you. Thanks. So the chat is now exploding, which means it's time to go into the workshops because people are like, well, what about me? And what about this? And you're like, well, good news, folks. For the next hour, we're going to go into breakout rooms, and your breakout room will have 3-ish people in it, and the team members will circulate amongst them. So I've got a slide for this. Here we go. And what you'll be doing is workshopping with the other participants things like, what do I do about this? What do you think? You know, sort of doing that sort of workshop, and the rest of us will circulate. If you have questions that you can't resolve or you just want more input from the team, we'll have a half an hour at the end for a sort of Q&A, FAQ sort of thing, where they'll all go in your questions will go in the chat, and we'll scan the chat and see if something's either reoccurring or something we all agree, the team agrees like is something we really need to address because it's a common issue. But everything in the chat will be used to make an FAQ that we'll send out later, an unknown later timeline when I have time, which is an unknown time, but in the future. So that's the sort of format we'll use. There are a few ground rules for these spaces. One is, actually, I'll stop the recording. We're done recording. Thanks everyone for watching.